Hey folks, this is Kalani. Patch 905 is right around the corner and might release sooner than you think. We have an extra hint about when we could expect this patch to release to live servers, as well as some more buffs and nerfs just snuck in at the last second there to a small handful of classes that I want to talk about. The Castle Nathria raid also received quite a few large nerfs to some very problematic bosses, so let's dive in and break down everything that's been going on. Let's look at those raid nerfs first, because I'm sure they're going to help a few guilds get some extra kills in these next couple of weeks. Lady Nerva is first on the chopping block. For starters, healers are now chosen as a last resort target of shared suffering and concentrate anima on Raid Finder normal and heroic difficulties. That should allow your healers to just sit back and take care of everyone else instead of running around sorting out lines or placing an ad that's about to pop up. Hooray for the healers! The passive damage of loose anima for open containers has been reduced on Raid Finder normal and heroic difficulties. This should give you better control over how much anima you can release from the containers and how many of them you can handle at the same time. With less to heal and less mechanics for your healers overall, this fight should become significantly easier for your healers to keep up with. And then the last change here, targets of shared suffering no longer take damage from the beams they are wearing on Raid Finder normal and heroic difficulties. Passing through the opposite edge will continue to damage targeted players. So again, less passive damage throughout the entire fight from this mechanic specifically. With these changes in place, taking down Lady Nerva on Raid Finder normal and heroic difficulties should be quite a bit easier now. No changes for Mythic Nerva just yet, so if you're still stuck on that one, you're going to have to wait a bit longer for some nerfs. The next boss receiving a few tweaks is Hungering Destroyer. A good chunk of these are aimed at the difficulty of this boss on Mythic, but some changes will apply to the other difficulties as well. First up, the boss's health has been reduced by 5% on Mythic difficulty, so if you were getting close but just couldn't quite shave off those last few percent of his health, this nerf is going to be pretty big for you. The encounter typically lasts way too long in my opinion, so a health nerf is definitely welcome indeed. In addition to that, they also reduced the damage players wearing Gluttonous Miasma take by 10% on Mythic difficulty. That is actually huge for this fight. With how this fight works and Gluttonous Miasma removing all other healing possibilities for those targets, any damage reduction is going to reduce the amount of health you have to steal from your party, which keeps your stacks lower, which reduces your raid's overall damage taken so your healers don't have to work as hard. This single nerf snowballs into making the fight significantly easier, which is great because Hungering Destroyer was destroying guilds. So many guilds are stuck on this boss right now and they just can't get past it. So hopefully these nerfs will help those players progress once again. On top of that, the damage increase of Essence Sap has been reduced by 20% per stack. This allows players to get higher stacks and provide additional healing for miasma targets without the damage going super crazy too quickly. Again, this change makes the fight significantly easier because it has so many knock-on effects. And then as some quality of life changes, Expunge now shows up in the combat log when it is applied to players, and Volatile Ejection now shows up as a debuff when a player is targeted with the spell. Both of these changes make it easier to track this encounter's abilities so you can react faster. And then the last boss with some changes this week is the Sun King Salvation encounter. The first change increases the amount of healing. Essence Overflow heals the boss up to 2.5% of his max health from 2%. An extra 0.5% health might not sound like a lot, but when you have 4 of these anima canisters on the floor at the same time, that's an extra 2% of the boss's health you don't have to cover yourself. Pushing the phases on this fight can be super close too, so every little helps. They also increased the Healing Done bonus from Sinful Boon to 100% per application, up from 50% on Mythic difficulty. This is a nice change to help your healers catch up in certain situations, but with a lot of Sun King strategies relying on skipping the ads that actually provide this buff, I'm not too sure how much this will actually help in the long run, especially as players get more gear and skip ad spawns more reliably. The last nerf here is pretty big though. They reduced the damage required to break the Cloak of Flame's Absorb shield by 10% on Mythic difficulty. Breaking shields on time was probably the most important deciding factor of whether you succeed or wipe on this fight on Mythic, so the most important ability here got nerfed by 10%. That's going to make things quite a bit easier in the long run. All of these nerfs should make it easier for guilds to progress through the raid, especially on Mythic difficulty. I am a little surprised that these nerfs took so long to come into effect, and that we're not seeing some larger, broader nerfs to the raid as a whole. We're getting to the point in a raid tier where the nerfs trickle in as we lead up to another content patch, but from the current timeline we probably won't see the next raid for quite a while, perhaps another 3 months. So maybe the dev team are being purposefully slow with the raid nerfs to try and stretch out the progression path this time around. At least we'll have some extra goodies to look forward to in patch 905. Speaking of 905, we have a handful of extra updates this week for the new build, including another revamp for the rogue Necrolord Covenant ability and a few tweaks here and there. For example, protection warriors have been given a 10% damage aura buff, so almost all of their abilities should hit quite a bit harder when 905 rolls around. Hunters are in the spotlight again, but not for a good reason this time, I'm afraid. One of their legendaries, Eagle Talon's Focus, has been knocked down a peg or two. It will now cause True Shot to last 3 additional seconds, down from 5, and reduce the focus cost of abilities by 25%, down from 50%. I heard quite a few hunters were having a bit too much fun with this legendary on the PTR, so it's not too surprising to see it get nerfed before it all goes live. And of course, the rogue Necrolord Covenant ability change. These changes are quite big, so I'm excited to see if they're going to be enough to get a few rogues to switch around their allegiances. So rated Bone Spike initial damage was increased by 300%. It should now be able to deal a critical strike properly. It grants 1 combo point plus 1 per active Bone Spike after it strikes the target. The damage over a time effect is no longer removed when a target heals to full, but the dot will be removed if a target leaves combat. Those last 2 changes in there will probably only apply in PvP situations for the most part, but increasing the upfront damage of this ability gives it a chance to shine in burst scenarios, as well as the long drawn out encounters too. Well, what do you think, rogues? You think this is enough? Ready to swap things up a bit, or are you too comfy with your current covenant? Now, it's all fine and dandy talking about the new stuff coming in 905, but what about a release date? Well, it looks like the early March target for this patch's release date could still be within reach. Obviously, it didn't release this past week, but it could very well be pushed to the live servers on March 9th or March 16th. The main reason why we suspect the patch is right on our doorstep is the fact that the latest PTR build, which was applied on Monday, was marked as a release candidate. That means the patch is more or less ready to go. Everything big or meaningful that's coming with the patch is in the build, and all that's left to do is make sure nothing's going to break horribly when it gets pushed to live servers, and then give it a good old push. Whenever a release candidate build appears on the PTR, it usually signifies the end of the PTR test cycle for the most part, and the patch should be released very soon afterwards. If this were a larger patch with an additional raid tier, or one that started a new season of Raid, Mythic Plus and PvP, I would expect a bit more of a heads up from the dev team. They'll like to give 1 to 2 weeks notice before big patches are released, and seeing as we haven't had any notice at this point, I would typically rule out the very next reset. However, patch 905 doesn't really have anything big in it. There are a few system updates, we're getting the new version of Valor Points and a lot of balance changes for Covenants and Legendary powers, but nothing that would really require the typical 2-week notice. So, in my opinion, anything goes. Another factor to consider is our current renown grind. Right now our max renown is 38, which gives us just 1 more week until we can cap out at renown 40. If the patch releases next week, that would be the week we can hit our current renown maximum, so that's a good indicator for when the patch could launch, or at least when the dev team were aiming to release it. Similarly, if the patch were to release 1 week after, we can already get renown 40, so that lines up very nicely too. Either way, if our renown top-down progression means anything at all to the dev team's plan for patch releases, which, let's be honest, it could mean absolutely nothing, but if it does, that makes it even more likely for patch 905 to release within the next 2 resets. We also know that the dev team wants to get this patch out ASAP so they can start patch 9.1 testing on the PTR, so I doubt we'll have to wait too much longer at all for patch 905. But that's it for this video. Do you think we'll see patch 905 next week, the week after, or maybe a bit later after that? When do you reckon? When do you think patch 9.1 will arrive? And do you think it might be a little too late? And what do you think of these raid nerfs? And do you think we need a few more? You know, some of the later bosses might need a couple nerfs. What do you think? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to everyone who subscribed on Twitch. You can see their names floating by on screen. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.